You ready to roll?
Absolutely.
Right on. Chip, so good to meet you, sir. Thank you for taking a minute out today.
Of course. Thank you for having me on.
You bet. So I'm so looking forward to getting into your world of writing and journalism. I
Yeah.
want to begin this way.
Yeah.
5 years ago, the biggest thing that affected all human beings was this pandemic.
Yeah.
How did you get through that era, and how has it changed the way that you do things today?
That's an excellent question. We had my wife and I had two daughters in their mid-20s, and one was living in DC, living her best life in DC, just like I lived my best life in DC in my 20s. We brought her back, kind of pressured her to come home, and we had a four-person unit, and one of my that same daughter has a health condition. So we did not want her getting COVID. And we formed a unit, and I do not know if we would have survived had we not gotten this dog that's now almost 70 pounds.
Yeah.
The dog helped us find the softness on our sides, and it kind of cut down some of the anxiety. I don't think I realized how much anxiety was circulating around. I just thought people were nervous and maybe cabin fever. Um, so I actually could have done better as, quote, the leader of the family, although my wife would disagree with that, in recognizing people, what people were going through. For myself, I just made myself start working on a new book. I had released my first novel, and it was going really well. And then this terrible virus starts spreading, and 5 million people died. So I can't complain about my book tour getting, kneecapped. But I started working on another book, and I also made myself an hour a day learn a new guitar song on something called Songster, which is a tablature site. And
Uh-huh.
I'm obsessed with the band Squeeze.
Yeah.
And I would just go learn hard song after hard song. And I thought this is the way I'm surviving, and I'm doing something for my mental health and developing a skill. Because I'm a restless person. And when we walked around during COVID, especially the early months, it did feel like a zombie movie.
Yeah. Yeah. It certainly did. So let me ask you this. To get an accurate handle on your career, not only now, but even
Yeah.
before, if I put you in front of a bunch of 12-year-olds at career day in a school, and one of the kids wanted to know what you do for a living, how do you answer that child?
I say I dig into myself for experiences and beliefs and historical elements, and try to weave them into a story that's going to make you pay attention for 15 minutes a day instead of going toward your phone. I let my imagination try to fill your head. And I very much believe in books are transportive. I think phones are poison. And I want to bring you into the world of fiction. I want you to go, who was William Shakespeare? And who was the guy that wrote Robinson Crusoe? And what about Lord of the Flies? And then contemporary fiction. I want to get them excited about the written word. And if they were going, I still don't understand that, I would say, I started off as a newspaper reporter. And that was my real world education out of college. That's where I was found the way things actually happen. And, curiosity is your ticket to unpeeling back reality. And I'd say if you're not curious, you got to start asking questions about things, because without curiosity, you're going to walk around a stupor.
Yeah. So take me back to when you were
And by
12.
the way, by now on that lecture, half the 12th graders will be outside on their phone.
Right, that's right. Yeah, if not before.
Yeah.
So let me ask you this. At 12, what did you want to be? What was your dream gig?
I always knew I wanted to be a writer inside. For a while, I wanted to be a paramedic, a
Okay.
professional USC football player, and then maybe a professional gigolo. But very early on, I wanted to be a writer, and
Yeah.
I read a lot. I asked a lot of questions, and even though I couldn't say journalist, I remember my mom watching the Watergate hearings, and my mom on the Republican side, and I said, "What's happening with all these people in this big room?" And she goes, "There's some sick men trying to take down the president." That's my mom said about. But I realized, no, I started getting curious about it, and when I learned about Woodward and Bernstein, and especially when I saw that movie when I was a little bit older, it just became this. This is who I want to be. This is what I want to do.
Yeah.
I love the idea of a crusade for the
Yeah.
public good. It's some quixotic, whimsical, stupid part of me, but I'm a Boy Scout that way. I want to leave the place a little bit better than I found it. And so journalism is a great way to develop your writing skills, to feel like you're on a mission. It's the First Amendment for a reason,
Yeah,
and you get access behind the rope lines, and you see the way the sausage is made.
absolutely. So where were you born and raised?
I was born and raised in Pasadena, California.
Okay, okay.
Yeah,
So what were the early elements from your upbringing, the seeds that were planted that gave you this curiosity, this love of reading, writing?
sure. I was the whoops baby of two older parents that didn't enjoy spending time in the same room together. And I had two older brothers that were both out of the house. My dad had done well as a self-made guy, but I was this little kid with nobody I could relate to except my dog and my ruffian neighborhood friends. And left to your own devices, you have to do something to keep your mind going. And there's only so many reruns of Gilligan's Islands you can watch
Yeah.
before you really start, anyway, thinking about Marianne too much. But anyway, my parents did get me a Encyclopedia Britannica. Back in the day when that was our internet, Encyclopedia Britannica, the actual physical books. And I made a plot. I'm going to read every page of every one of these books, A to C, I got through like 7 pages. But I did start going through my mom's books, the first edition book she had, like of Robinson Crusoe and The Great Gatsby, things like that. Kids' books, Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. So I'd say being somewhat lonely in a big house where I always had to look up to get anybody's attention, that sent me lowering my eyes onto a book.
What was the first book that blew you away? What was the gateway for you?
Hmm. I'm going to say maybe The Three Musketeers.
Okay.
Yeah. D'Artagnan.
Yeah.
Yes, I
Yeah, yeah,
love that. And then, the greatest, of course, the greatest Musketeers like movie ever made was Princess Bride.
yeah.
So,
Oh, yeah.
never get involved in a land war in Asia. That's a
Yeah.
disaster.
That's
So,
it.
yeah, but I liked, I think because I didn't have two brothers in the houses and I yearned for belonging. And my new book is about belonging too. And so I can imagine myself with the Three Musketeers. Then I became entranced, as I still am, with the Beatles.
Yeah.
And, I always wished on a rainy Saturday morning they would come and knock on my door and say,
Uh,
Chip, come on, can you
yeah.
play some rhythm guitar?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And so I very much want to be a member of the Beatles like everybody else,
Uh-huh.
especially when I saw all the girls they were getting. So
Yeah,
yeah,
right.
I wanted to belong.
Yeah. So I'm curious, what was your first interview for your first journalistic job? What was that like?
It was a thrill.
Yeah.
It was an absolute thrill. I'd come out of grad school when I sort of drifted a little bit out of journalism school at USC. And I had gotten this notion in my 20s, I want to save the world from nuclear Armageddon.
Yeah.
We came much closer to nuclear war in 1983 than we ever realized
Wow.
when a exercise in Europe was misinterpreted by the Soviets.
Wow.
And there was this scary movie, I'm a bit older than you, TV movie, not particularly well done, called The Day After.
Oh my God. That was
Do you remember?
crazy. Oh
The Day
yeah.
After was based, it starts with a football team in Lawrence, Kansas,
Uh-huh.
Big 12
They
football,
filmed it out. Yeah, I remember
Big
that.
12 football before all the NIL, and a ICBM flies out of there. And it really traumatized me. And so I got this belief, and back in the late '80s, I wanted to work for the CIA as an analyst, State Department, and then a guy named Mikhail Gorbachev comes along and kind of ruins all my Cold War fighting dreams. Every career I go into dies a little bit, so be
Yeah.
careful with this interview. Anyway, I came back to LA and I got a job as a cub reporter at this place called the LA Business Journal. And the first story I got to do was about a new air defense plane, something I knew about from my studies and something I could draw on from my writing ability. But I still hadn't really had my first official newspaper story. And I did the piece. I interviewed some defense industry analyst. How well is this going to do? What's the stock and how does it play geopolitically? And my editor said, great job. And, getting a shot in the arm from somebody that early is so critical. and that boosted my confidence, Joe. And I felt that I was where I exactly should be. Journalism was in my blood. And this guy said, you're onto something. So yeah, a story about, I think it might have been like the F-22, Lockheed's F-22, something like that.
That's wonderful. So, what was the story that made you grow the most? Maybe it was excruciating in the beginning, but it turned out to be a really solid learning experience and made you kind of expand your vernacular as one, not only as a journalist, but watching the world unfold.
Okay, so I wanted to be a daily reporter at the LA Times back in the time when the LA Times was a juggernaut. I'm sadly sad to say it's not anymore. Like many newspapers, it's still a good paper. But so you need like 5 years daily experience to get them back in their day when they're winning Pulitzers to look at you. So I went to a smaller daily out in my area, and the story I'll never forget is about a child that drowned at a YMCA. If the son of a kind of a broken family, and he drowned in a YMCA, even though the dad said he can't swim. Watch him, don't let him go in the deep end. And it was this system failure. And when I had to interview the father, and I had just had a child, and it was just gut wrenching to do it. And the guy showed such courage and grace. I also saw the dark side of newspapers and a part of a journalism I never want to be at, which is the ambulance chasing, tragedy chasing, you know, get your tears on camera journalism. My editor keeps saying, no, it's not your, he wasn't poignant enough. Go call the dad back and get some more details about losing your child. What was it like at the funeral home? What was it like getting that call? And I thought, in my mind, F you.
Yeah,
It's not worth it for the glory of a story that maybe goes to the Associated Press.
yeah.
So on one side, I saw a human being being very strong and noble about remembering his son, and the other was an editor that was just thinking about getting a pat on the back from her boss.
Yeah. Wow, that's amazing. So, let me ask you this. Who has been that consistent hero, whether it's a writer or a journalist, anybody in general that's always been that inspirational force for you?
I'd say a lot of my writing heroes are that way. But I do know some very brave journalists. There's one friend of mine, I'll just mention, his name's David Willman, who won a Pulitzer at the LA Times, went to the Washington Post, just did incredible reporting, taking on really powerful people that would probably like to see him in pain, dead, sent to prison. He wrote about uh, the unlikelihood that any missile defense will save us from ICBMs. He won the Pulitzer about a very dangerous drug backed by a very powerful pharmaceutical company. The drug was called Resolin. It was marketed for diabetics. My mom was taking it. And so he faced such pushback, and yet he persevered, this guy, David Wellman. And it just taught me about bravery and not being afraid. And I would face some of that in my journalism career, you know. And I've had people impersonate lawyers. I've gone to interviews where they thought they'd intimidate me by sending in 10 people, on one side of the table. But I just thought about my friend David and all the dragons he slayed.
Speaking of Woodward and Bernstein, when I look at the modern landscape, I come from a journalistic background, and I
Yeah,
asked a good friend of mine that was my first editor, he's a dear friend of mine.
yeah,
I was like, why aren't these dragnets of journalism catching what's going on right now? Because it's by far the most dark, nefarious that
yes,
I've ever seen in my life, and I think
yeah,
most of us ever have. Why? And he was just like, it's there's no corroborate all of the news that we get right now is social media. We don't know what's true or not. There's no corroborating um, sources out there that are grabbing
yes,
anything. What do you think? Why, like even now, all of a sudden this Epstein thing was
yeah,
no, no, no. Now it's yes, 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 which is a game plan.
of
Like
course.
why there's slam dunks that are happening that aren't doing what the law should be doing. What's going on today?
I will say, though, in the first Trump administration, the media held his feet to the fire.
Right.
all the time, and he can say conspiracy and witch hunt and hoax. God, by now I can just parody anything he says.
Yeah.
They did hold his feet to the fire, and they helped get two righteous impeachments going and expose other corruption. Maybe we would have liked it to be a little more balanced, but between social media and demagogues like him, purposely trying to sow mistrust of institutions like a newspaper or a broadcast, combined with the effect of the internet. I mean, it was only a matter of time before
Yeah.
this was going to happen, and technology changes. The newspaper era, print era was never going to last forever, sad as we feel about it. And some publications adapted better than others. The New
Yeah.
York Times did amazingly. The LA Times, unfortunately, waited too long to get a paywall and really adapt. So it is adapt or perish. I still think the structures of journalism are there now,
Yeah.
but it was a very bad precedent to empower the media at the same time the companies were paying millions of dollars to the White House.
Hmm.
That's never happened before, and
Yeah.
that's wrong. And I hope they'll come and get back. I hope they'll appeal for every cent back. But every time you hear, well, fake news, that just chipping away at the First Amendment, and it is the first for a reason. We're supposed to be the watchdogs.
Yeah.
So yeah, I really hope people will develop their critical thinking skills and not be a lazy voter, not get their crap off Facebook or
Yeah.
Instagram. If it's important, spend 15, 20 minutes researching it,
Hmm.
and then let your mind figure out what do you think is reasonable. Yeah, there is a lot of brainwashing going on. And I would say, I think the next president needs to have a vice president who's partly a culty programmer.
Yeah, for sure. Absolutely. Let me ask you this. If you could cover one story journalistically, you could go back in time or even today, what would be a dream story that you would love to be there for?
What would be that's an excellent question. Um, I think I would have loved to have been in early 2000s Russia as it was, quote, transitioning from
Yeah.
communism, authoritarianism, to democracy before it became a kleptocracy.
Yeah.
I like to have known how close Russia was coming to really being a vibrant society that skewed to the West. And how somebody like Putin plotted and killed and connived and schemed, how he just flipped. I mean, he did push back the tide of history. Maybe it's only temporarily. I find that very interesting.
Yeah.
Putin was this little scrawny KGB agent burning documents in East Germany when the wall fell. But there was a point in the early 2000s, there was even a story saying history was over. I don't even know if you remember this. Nothing more is going to happen. It's democracy forever. It's capitalism. All the turmoil of past centuries is a thing of the past. It would have been, I like that. There was a brief moment when you could hold that belief in your
Yep.
mind.
Uh-huh. Yep.
Yeah.
That's
And there was
fascinating.
also a lot of Wild West in Russia. They call it
Yeah.
today, it's basically nukes with a gas station. But it was a really interesting place, Russia. Multiple time zones, ethnicities. And I don't think the West understood the nature of the Russian bear as well as we could have.
Yeah.
And we probably did. They're a very paranoid country. A
Yeah.
lot of warmongers, also a lot of good people. I think that was the moment in history where we took our eye off the ball.
Yeah, I totally agree. So let me ask you this. The one thing about doing any kind of documentary or journalistic expose,
Yeah.
especially on film, is that you get to see like the Michael Jordan, the behind the curtain, or the sports team that went from rags to riches, the business person like Jeff
Yeah.
Bezos. But you don't see that with writing. Writing's a solitary kind of
Yes, it
thing. You
is.
don't see the writer at the sweating over the old typewriter. But if you could watch a writer write, watch their creative aura just
Yeah.
shine. What writer would you love to watch in their
Um,
throes?
I have to say John Irving.
Yeah.
I'm such a fan of him, and he's not even living. He's still alive and writing and knocking out great work. He lives in Canada, but he's got such a big heart.
Yeah.
And like when he was developing one of my favorite books of ever, The World According to Garp, A Prayer for Owen Meany. How did he research that? How many books did he read? Did he go on walks to get inspiration? Was Garp based on somebody he knew? What was his process in creating that world? Because I want to be a citizen of that world.
Yeah.
And when I've now gone to fiction, and I'm always thinking about John Irving. What would he do in this situation? My first novel, I had a little magical realism, and I sweated about how to explain it and how much backstory to give it. And I read some of his books. He doesn't do any of that. It just one little landmark on the road of the character, and things like that. And also just writing with empathy. He writes with a lot of empathy, especially towards women.
Yeah.
So yeah, I would love to see his process and be a fly on his wall.
He's amazing. He shaped so many levels of me with storytelling growing
Yeah,
up that I didn't realize. Like Garp was so big. And
yeah,
then later in my life, reading Owen Meany in that movie didn't quite hit it. Now
no,
Garp
it did.
did,
Yeah,
right? But Owen Meany, but I still remember all of it in all caps in the book. Just like the
yeah,
little
yeah,
things that he would do, like the E. E. Cummings poem that would come down a staircase. Those things, those
yeah.
literary agencies that just make your mind fly. It's wonderful.
Absolutely. The other person I'd love to be in the room with is one of my rock heroes, which is Ray Davies of the
Yeah.
Kinks.
Uh-huh.
Ray Davies, before, as much as I love the Beatles, I'd say Ray Davies is on the same level as John Lennon. And Ray
Yeah.
Davies wrote about transsexuals, atomic war,
Uh-huh.
living on an island, horny British aristocrats getting frying on LSD on a Sunday in London, and a million other subjects,
Yeah.
and told with humor and insight. And I'd love to know, does the guy read every newspaper in London? Does he have books all around his apartment? Is he a visual learner? How his process goes, because somebody that wildly creative must have a method. You know?
Absolutely. I would love to catch Hemingway at a table with
Yeah,
like a bottle of scotch and like 100 cats and their tails are just switching around
yeah,
while
yeah,
he's just hitting the Wurlitzer.
yeah. So he's sitting there in Cuba looking out the window. I guess he types standing up.
Okay, I think
And
I've heard that.
and can I swear?
Oh, please.
He would type standing up shit faced in the morning, and then I think he would sober up, and then he would edit clean
I
minded.
gotcha. Okay.
So yeah, I don't know if that's a very sustainable
I don't know.
habit. But there are some writers that basically put on blinders, close their shades, don't go on
Yep.
the internet. As a distracted, recovering journalist, now a
Yep.
novelist, it is hard to, de-link yourself. But
Absolutely.
I would like to see that process. And I think in a way it was easier back in the day
Yeah.
because you didn't have your phone
Uh-huh.
and your a whole family of handlers and wannabes around you. It was a more secluded, focused lifestyle. Yeah,
So
can
much
be can
noise
be
today.
lonely too.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, yeah. So much noise. So let me ask you this. if if you were to walk into your childhood home when you were 12 or 13 years
yeah.
old at your age now and give that version of you a coffee table book that's your life, would that young version of you believe that your life turned out this way?
I think so. I think so. I didn't know where that question was going. Yeah, hopefully that coffee table book would not include some photos from certain road trips.
Right, right.
But I think so. But I wish I could go back to my 12-year-old self and say, it's gonna be okay.
Yeah.
Time on your side. When you're young, and in writing my book, my novel, which is part coming of age, I realized looking through the yearbook and talking to friends, when you're a kid, you really only live like an hour into the future. The
Yeah.
next day, oh, I got a vacation. You just I don't know why. Maybe, that's how you fill in the air in your brain, but I just wish I would have said, just take the bigger picture.
Yeah.
This bully after you, he's going to be a loser working, a loading dock, in some terrible backwater.
Yeah.
That's going to be his fate. And so when he's punching you, just laugh,
Yeah.
or the girl that won't give you a sniff, well, she'll be calling you when you're a famous reporter.
Uh-huh.
I wish I would have, been able to come back and just kind of give myself a psychological Valium.
Absolutely. So when you got to the point where you decided you were going to start writing and you were going to start putting books into the world, you have this idea of what it's like
Yeah.
to be an author and a writer in
Yeah.
that capacity. What's the difference between this idea of what you thought it was going to be and how it's turned out?
Oh, I love this question. So I grew up in East Pasadena in the foothills.
Yeah.
Back when it was the back end of the smog crisis, but it was still, I mean, you were breathing in death every day.
Uh-huh.
And we lived behind this famous mountain range in this one mountain called Mount Wilson, where all the TV antennas and all that. When
Yeah.
bad smog would happen, it would vanish like in a magic show, even though we were a quarter mile away. And so my first book after I left journalism to work on books was about a social history of the LA smog crisis. It came out in 2008 at a terrible, terrible time. Again, my bad timing. It was the beginning of the financial depression
Yeah.
or recession, the Great Recession. So
Yeah.
nobody wanted to read about smog and sociology and where climate change was going. Nonetheless, the big publishers and the old media were still around, and it was fabulous. New York Times calling me to write columns, appearing on Google, getting a big library appearance in LA with famous politicians. I felt like the red carpet was rolled out for me. And though the book was only did okay commercially, did really well critically. A few years later, the book industry has now changed even more. I have a true crime book I'm working on based on a source I met when I was a journalist about a assassination in 1979. LA, and I got um, bamboozled by an unscrupulous publisher. Other things started unwinding in the book world. All the momentum I had started vanishing, and I saw the dark side of the publishing world and started questioning my own self. And in a short 3 years, I went from feeling I couldn't, I could do no wrong to now I can't even get arrested. And we all go through those periods. It did help forge me as a person and renew my own faith, belief in myself, examine things. But it was hard, just because you got it going one time, you savor every moment because it can go like that. And I also learned you don't forget fame and notoriety, all that. What are you doing? So every book is better than the next. I have an obsessive personality. I do want people to see a through line of, enlightenment over the years.
Absolutely. So, of everything that you've done up to this point in your life, accomplished, evolved to, what are you the
Yeah.
proudest of?
Writing wise or life wise?
Just in general, overall, yeah. What stands out?
Well, having two incredible daughters that have their act together a lot quicker than their dad did at their age. That's the pat answer. There's nothing I can do that will ever be better than that. Writing wise, I feel excellent about my journalism career, but I'm very proud about my first novel, which is about a famous bridge in Pasadena that was once the emblem of everything the 20th century was going to represent, working with concrete, engineering brilliance, welcoming cars. This is a new way of transportation for a new world. But this bridge in my hometown of Pasadena also had a very dark alter ego, a suicide bridge.
Yeah.
And for decades, those two light and darks coexisted, but people kind of bought the cities and the area's mythology about that bridge. Well, I did a historical novel where I used my journalism skills to weave together an imaginary story, and I feel pretty good that I told the truth about things many sides of Pasadena and elsewhere wanted buried.
Yeah.
How we respond to suicide, how we deal with mentally ill people. Where does real history begin and the whitewashing end?
Yeah.
So I'm pretty proud of myself for doing that. And I told a bizarre story, with a kind of a Yankee Doodle dandy guy who's a solar inventor and a clairvoyant dog. And as a local, I feel like I had the right to skewer my hometown. It didn't always go over well with everybody here,
Yeah.
but when you uncover something and you reveal the truth of it in complexity, it feels like a victory.
Absolutely. So at the end of the day, Chip, everyone has a perception of you. Family, friends, fans, everyone that you know in a business sense, but you run the show. What's your perception of you? Who do you think you are?
somebody who wants my curiosity to take me where the universe wants me to go, that I don't ignore signals, caught up in my own narcissistic thinking, because we're all in a way narcissists, but I have my eyes open to what's real and what's not, And I very much I'm a spiritual person, and one of my underlying goals is to help dispel the mythology and fear and hopelessness around death.
Yeah.
I don't think there is death.
Right.
I think science is even dragging the most hard-headed atheists towards that view.
Yeah.
And it bothers me in my soul so much that I think I was programmed to do this before I came to this earth. I just want to just show the Grim Reaper is bullshit,
Yeah.
and more parts of the world have a better understanding of our soul and reincarnation, all those things, much more than in the West, which uses a lot of scientific reductionism. If you can't see it in a laboratory, it must not exist.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's it. I feel that is my biggest mission
Yeah.
in life, Joe. When I was a kid, I got hit in the nose with a high velocity baseball.
Yeah.
That night in my bed, I had a vision. I kept this story inside myself for 30, 40 years because I didn't think people would believe me. But then I reached a certain point. I thought, no, F it. That's the whole point, is
Uh-huh.
to tell it despite the doubts, despite the skepticism and eye rolling. This is what I'm supposed to do. So both my books have dealt with death. There's some reincarnation. Those aren't the big themes, but I just know this is part of the reason I'm here.
Yeah.
And I encourage people when they're feeling sad and lonely or lost, watch a near-death experience video. That's another thing I did during COVID. Some of the most interesting people in the world are hospice workers. I'm
Yeah.
telling you,
Oh yeah.
they see things, know things, experience things that whatever crappy pay they're getting, maybe that's their real pay because they're getting a spiritual, bonus at the end.
100%.
Um, so anyway, so that's what I'm so glad I brought that out because
Yeah.
yeah, I feel so strongly about that. I'll say the last thing, when I was finishing my book, it was first day of the Eaton and Palisades fires out here in California,
Yeah.
two of the most destructive wildfires ever.
Yeah.
I almost went out to my backyard because there was a terrible windstorm that preceded it and spread the fires. I almost went out to look at my neighbor's giant eucalyptus tree behind me that I'd always worried was going to fall, but something like whispered in my ear, go back to your book. You're not done. Forget the wind, forget that tree. And I had to fix a line in my book, and I had to fix it to this. I swear to God, teenage horndoggery,
Yeah.
because I'm writing a coming of age story.
Uh-huh.
And basically, between the time that I went in to my office in my home at my house, fixed that on my keyboard, and came back out, that tree fell.
Wow.
And my heart was in my throat
Wow.
because I realized, oh my God, people escape dying if that tree had a roof. I escaped dying because where the tree fell down, I would have been at in
Yeah.
this corner of my yard.
Wow.
So it started getting me going. God, what happened? I wrote a book with near-death experience in it, and I just had my own near-death experience.
Wow.
And I mean, I was like almost like sweating.
Yeah. That's wild. What a great story. So later days, if anybody wants to get a copy, previous work, where's the best place to go?
They actually just come to your door, Joe, and knock
Okay.
on it. And,
Okay.
and you're going to have you're going to, no, the Amazon.com, chipjacobs.com. My publisher, got a great publisher out here. Going to be part of a big publisher family soon, called Rare Bird Books, but Amazon.com for most people. Although, please do support independent bookstores.
Absolutely.
They're dying off, like fish in a drought.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Totally. Yeah. I will make sure to put all these links in the show notes. What a joy, Chip. I'm so glad that we arced into our worlds for a little bit. Thank you,
Thank
sir.
you. It was great.
Wonderful.
It went like a million miles an hour. I always know that I have a good interviewer when that happens.
That's it. It's like
Yeah,
time flies when you're having fun.
exactly. Yeah. Thank you. God
Thank you,
bless
sir.
journalism forever.
Yes, sir. I love it. Thank you.
All right.
Take
See
care.
you.